Looking at the game's reception so far, it seems like many players have a strong connection to Kirby's return to Dreamland. For many people it was probably their first Kirby title back in the day after the franchise focused itself on handhelds over a decade. To no one's surprise, there's a deep nostalgic feeling connected to this specific entry, as it did not only mark the blueprint for the series but colored every following title with its fantastic groundwork. Without Return to Dreamland there wouldn't be Planet Robobot, a fan favorite and the presumable perfection of the original formula. At this point there's no way to deny Return to Dreamland's impact on the franchise, which is why it makes absolutely sense to remake it despite the fact the origin aged quite well. As most fans, I have a very special connection to it as well, since it was the first proper home console Kirby game after I declared the series to be my favorite one. Yes, with a channel theme like mine, it might be hard to imagine that Kirby wasn't the center of my universe once, but just when I found my passion for the gluttonous pink beast, it seemed like hell heard my call and conveniently gifted me with one of their best games. It's not long anymore until the remake is coming out, so why not relish this moment for a second, just like we did with the Forgotten Land, and look back. My Return to Dreamland holds a special place in everyone's heart. Just like I mentioned, Kirby wasn't my favorite series since the beginning. Starting with Kirby 64, it was my first taste of what should become my priority, but unlike other games on the very same system, Kirby 64 wasn't 3D. As someone who grew up with open 3D titles and didn't experience the monumental shift from 2D to 3D, Kirby 64 was always a lesser game in comparison to Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie or Donkey Kong 64. Of course I had my joy with it, and especially the minigames will always remain as one of my most entertaining memories, but it was nothing more beyond than a simple fun game. This should change as Kirby Air Ride and The Amazing Mirror marked the moment Kirby Adventures anchored themselves as one of the most unique experiences I will always hold to me thanks to their outstanding multiplayer components. Both of them showed me the potential of what Kirby can provide, yet there were other series that still impressed me on a deeper level. Adventuring as a child through the Wind Waker's colorful world or jumping through Sunshade's open immersive areas felt much more thrilling in comparison to Kirby's straightforward, often two-dimensional level design, and despite the fact I do not think of 2D platformers of lesser adventures anymore, it truly clouded my impression back in the day. The moment my view on Kirby finally changed has ironically nothing to do with games. When I was old enough to discover YouTube and find out about all the stuff I didn't catch, like Kirby 64's true final boss, I came across the animation show. As you all probably know, animation shows, or shows in general, to games tend to deliver on everything but quality, and I was rather skeptical what this specific show was all about. After a short examination, it became quickly apparent that the Kirby animation show is one of the few finely adapted animes of games in general, and I watched every single episode with absolute pleasure. It gave the whole universe so many character, and I was still in the perfect age to not feel alienated of the overall childlike tone, as if the universe sensed my slow transition from a mere fan to a lunatic. Superstar Ultra and Epic Yarn should quickly follow to feed my newly flourished desire for Kirby. Naturally both of them were great, but Superstar Ultra was a handheld title which came out rather frequently, and Epic Yarn was so different it barely counts as a true traditional Kirby experience. Luckily all of them were mere appetizers to the real comeback we all waited for, Kirby's Return to Dreamland. I still remember when I found out about the game just bare weeks after I played Epic Yarn, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Everything looked so modern, so polished, and just what everyone imagined an up-to-date Kirby entry should look like. On top of that, we got a multiplayer where you could play as not only Kirby or Meta Knight, but King Dedede and Head Goomba as well. Of course today this is nothing special anymore since Star Allies kinda spoiled us with playable characters, but in the past it wasn't quite common to get the opportunity to take control of characters like Dedede. The hype was immense, especially after other franchises like Donkey Kong or Rayman already got their grand return to past strengths. At last it was finally time for Kirby, and as we all know, they delivered on more than one front. Like intended from the developers, I played Return to Dreamland in multiplayer and even visited the Gamescom to play the game earlier. It was a little uncomfortable playing with 3 other literal children, but a man's gotta play his children's game, am I right? Suffice to say, everyone was pleased with the end result. Return to Dreamland holds up to the 10-year-old expectations by offering exactly what everyone wanted: classic Kirby gameplay with a modern code. It was this formula that made Donkey Kong Country Returns turned so popular, so it should naturally work in Kirby's case as well. Back in the day, I wasn't really paying attention to directors or developers in general. I probably didn't even know that Kirby isn't created by Nintendo, but now you have to be aware it was the first mainline original title of the new director Kumazaki, which makes Return to Dreamland all the more glorious. If there's going to be a new leader behind the beloved series, many things can go wrong since it may clash with the philosophies of what made the series so beloved in the first place. This is the reason why it's all the more impressive how well Return to Dreamland ultimately turned out to be. It's clear from the beginning that Kumazaki significantly cares for the franchise just as much, if not more, than every past director, and it's shown during every single aspect of the game. The length is more than enough for a Kirby game, the graphics are colorful, and the bosses are such an upgrade. I will never stop rambling about how much I adore good boss fights and how boring many of them tend to be in other games, especially in platformers, which is why I'm so thankful that Kumazaki shares this deep love for amazingly staged and varied boss enemies. Obviously, we're not going to spoil anything here, but everyone who played the final of Return to Dreamland for the first time when it originally released will probably remember the jaw-dropping events. In comparison to other Nintendo games, especially the 2D ones, it was and it still is on a whole other level. Today, it may come across as standard in terms of the current state of the franchise, but do not fear in case you haven't played the game. The climax will surely not disappoint. This brings us directly to today. At its announcement, the only thing which seemed new was an unknown copy ability and additional minigames on top of the overall graphical upgrade. Since then, the sky is clear with even more sub-games, new cosmetics like masks and one more copy ability. On their own, these features are small fries, but if we combine them with the already splendid base game, we presumably get a packed Kirby adventure, which does not need to hide behind the Forgotten Land. At first, I didn't really care too much about the sub-games since I didn't expect too much of them or one of my past favorites. Well, this healthy skepticism turned out to be wrong, with not only including a brand new one which seems super interesting, but my all-time favorite checkerboard chase from Kirby 64 too. I cannot really stress enough the fact how much this means to me. You probably know these moments where you hope for a certain feature of the game to be included, but secretly know it will never happen because it's either too niche or the developers might simply not be aware of their popularity. The very same thing happened in this case, since I'm not really aware if checkerboard chase is actually that popular, but it appears like the creators agree. This sub-game is brought back. In case you may not understand what makes this specific minigame so special, there's a whole independent indie game based solely on checkerboard chase, which should ultimately prove how fun the concept is. Overall, I'm extremely pleased with the expanded collection of minigames and look forward to Mecha and Sand Kirby, both extremely intriguing abilities. The only thing left which would make this remake downright perfect for me are certain features I do not really expect to happen, unfortunately. I'm mainly talking about the option to immediately switch to hard mode, since this isn't a new game and veterans should get the chance to get the juicy stuff right from the start. Again, not spoiling anything, but the hard mode is the kinda true version of the main adventure due to how some bosses are so much better in this campaign, and since this isn't a new game, veterans shouldn't be forced to play through the game twice to get to the good stuff. Besides, being able to play as Meta Knight, DDD or Head Goomba in single player would be a nice addition as well. I'm fully aware this is a Kirby game, and the game is called Kirby's Return to Dreamland, but there's no reason to still restrict the players. Just like me back in the day, I bet there are countless of younger people who are much more interested in playing as these side characters instead of the protagonist. Maybe as a feature after beating the game once. The main gimmick, the super abilities, are not even necessary to beat the game. Well, except for 2 moments, but it's nothing to completely miss out on. Naturally, they could even take one step further and add Margolore, but this steps into the territory of stuff which wasn't in the base game. You can always wish for more with these remakes, and I'm trying to keep my hopes within the roots of the original, meaning I'm not asking for stuff which was never possible or there to begin with. One possible feature which kinda strikes in between these rules is Kirby's Dream Collection. You probably know the new missions added to this anniversary collection, and due to how the Dream Collection never released in Europe, us filthy Europeans never got the chance to experience this seemingly fantastic collection. Of course, this would be the perfect chance to include certain aspects of the collection into this remake, since they are based on the same foundation, but right now there are sadly no signs of it. You know, screw the hard mode and playable characters. If the Dream Collection is somewhat incorporated, I would be perfectly happy. It would add so much to the overall package and not only make the deluxe version the ultimate version to play the game, but perhaps even the best modern 2D Kirby to this day. And because this is a remake, of course I cannot simply ignore the first thing which strikes our eyes, the upgraded visuals. And my god, does it look outright stunning. The Forgotten Land already had one of the most breathtaking visuals of the franchise so far, but to be honest, Return to Dreamland Deluxe might dethrone it. Something about the new style has a certain childlike character to it that is very reminiscent of one of the cancelled Kirby games for the GameCube. And considering how Return to Dreamland as such is built on the foundation of another cancelled title from the same console, it kinda closes the circle of all these failed attempts. I can only imagine how happy the developers probably are to squeeze in as much scrapped features or visuals as possible. Who knows, maybe Sand Kirby was planned for one of them as well. Some people may have a problem with the black outlines, but I just think they look stylish and let items, enemies and characters in general pop way more. It may be recency bias, but right now I think Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe is the most beautiful Kirby game we have. And this concludes our journey to this point. Luckily, the wait until the game's release was once again not too long, and I'm actually more hyped than I thought. Kirby remakes may be rare, but they never disappoint. And I'm certain this glorious return to Dreamland will step into the same tracks.